Hi, my name is Megha Mishra, and today I'm going to be discussing the film Cart. To start off, we should introduce some basic facts about the film. Cart is a movie from 2014 that premiered internationally at the 2014 Toronto Film Festival on September 7th, and was released in South Korea a few months later on November 13th. It's directed by Boo Ji-young. Directing is a very male dominated field, and she's notable for being extremely vocal about female directors and the contributions that they can make in the film industry, deeming them to be on par with those of male directors. She says that female directors are often pigeonholed into this idea of women's cinema, when in fact they make movies that everyone can consume, even if those topics are about women. To that end, Cart is in many ways a story about women and is her best known film, based on South Korea's 2007 Elan supermarket strike. I'll describe this real life context in more detail later. For now, it's important to know that CART follows the lives of temporary female employees at a supermarket who form a union after their contracts are unfairly terminated. So, CART is billed as an ensemble cast, and it is to some extent, but there are some key characters. If the film had to have a main character, it would be Sunhee, who is played by Yoon Jung-ah. She is the employee at the Mart supermarket store that we spend the most time following. Next, there is Haemi, who is the employee who creates the workers' union at the core of the film, played by Moon Jung-hee. Finally, there is Sunrae, a cleaner at the store who initially helps Haemi, played by the late Kim Young-ae. These three women are the main figures of the union for the first half of the film and serve as the union representatives. Later, Dongjun, a male permanent employee, joins the union and becomes its leader. Dongjun is played by Kim Kang-woo. Lastly, Sunny's teenage son Taeyoung is played by K-pop group EXO's Do Kyung-soo, who is also known by his stage name Dio. I think that in order to understand what CART is really about, it's important to have some context regarding A, how labor even operates in South Korea, because it looks pretty different from the way people are employed in the US, and B, the real world events that inspired the movie, namely the 2007 Elan supermarket strike. The idea of non regular work first started to become a thing in the 1990s. Essentially, after several key legal victories in 1987, regular workers, or people who were regularly employed, secured several workers' rights victories. After this, there was a need for a term that classified everyone who wasn't a regular worker. So, all of these different groups of people, temporary workers, part timers, people who work from home, got lumped together and started getting called irregular workers. This isn't a legal definition. What it basically means to be an irregular worker is that you're not a regular one, and therefore you don't have the guarantee of all the benefits that regular workers are entitled to per Korean labor laws. For instance, they're not provided the four major insurances corporations must provide regular workers, namely health insurance, occupational hazard insurance, unemployment insurance, and the national pension. Another key distinction is that regular workers in Korea are guaranteed employment and can't have an end date to their employment unless they retire. Unlike them, irregular workers have no such guarantee and can be terminated without cause. Now that we've gotten over what a regular and irregular worker are, we can move on to the real world events that inspired the film. Basically, there's a large conglomerate in South Korea known as the Elan Group. They operate malls, restaurants, that kind of thing, but they also have supermarkets, which is what we're going to be focusing on. For its supermarkets, they hired mostly irregular workers. These workers were generally married women over 30 and were being paid a lot less than the national monthly average for workers' salary in Korea at the time. What makes 2007 a turning point is that in 2006, the South Korean government passed the Irregular Employment Protection Act, which basically said that if an irregular employee has had continuous employment for 2 years at one job, they must be promoted to a regular employee. This is bad news for companies who were using irregular workers as cheap labor. So, in June 2007, Elan fired around 570 irregular workers who were about to be promoted to regular workers per the new law. These were mostly female cashiers and sales assistants. To combat this, the Korean Confederation of Trade Union created the Elan Labor Union, which is one of the first irregular workers' unions in the country. They began striking on June 10, 2007, but were largely ignored. Finally, on June 30th, around 600 members of the Elan Labor Union started a sit-down strike in Elan's main shopping complex in the World Cup Stadium. They remained in the stadium for 3 weeks, but were eventually forced out by riot police. This was fairly violent and caught the attention of the media, sparking a national outrage. Due to this new public scrutiny, Elan Group finally agreed to negotiate and came to an agreement with the union. But I'm going to keep the details of that agreement a secret for now, since it's a spoiler for the movie. With all that context out of the way, we can start talking about the actual film now. The movie begins with an assembly of all of the employees from a supermarket called the Mart. Sunny, our main character, is called to the front and praised for being a loyal worker for 5 years now, without getting a single penalty. Because of this hard work, she's earned the privilege of a promotion and will become a regular employee. However, behind the scenes, the higher-ups are thinking about how to outsource their labor like all the other supermarket chains, ultimately deciding that they will terminate all of the irregular female employees' contracts, getting rid of them by the end of the month. Notices are put up the next day in the store announcing this, and all of the women receive texts saying their contracts will be terminated, sparking panic, especially in Sunny, who will now not be getting that promotion, seeing as how she was just fired. All of the fired women meet, and a cashier named Hami announces that she has an idea. In order to combat this unfair and illegal termination of their contracts, the woman should form a union. She actually has the forms to create a union with her and passes them out. Hami will be the union representative for the cashiers. An elderly woman named Sunri will be the representative for the cleaners. Sunny is at first hesitant to sign, not wanting to make an enemy of the company when she was just supposed to be promoted, but eventually remembers that she, too, was terminated and ends up signing the agreement. She's then talked into becoming the third representative. The three union representatives schedule a meeting with the company, but no one shows up. In this photo here, we can see a scene that I think is pretty important. The assistant manager of the store is confused why they aren't at least hearing the woman out, because he thinks firing them all is unfair. The head of the store dismisses him, laughing it off as female hysteria. The direct quote is, "They'll tire out of it, they're just women." This is why it's important to remember that being an irregular worker in South Korea is something that disproportionately affects women. These are women who are afforded less stable jobs on average than men, who work with no benefits or security and often for far less money. None of that is acknowledged or respected by the men in charge of the supermarket. Because they were ignored when they tried to negotiate, the women decide to go on strike. Sunny is torn. On one hand, she thinks their treatment has been unfair. On the other, the assistant manager has offered her a promised regular role if she leaves the union. She's worried about her two kids and how she'll provide for them, as her son has just called her because he can't eat at school. She's forgotten to pay his lunch money. Because of this, she initially doesn't show up to the strike. One by one, the women tear off their blue uniforms, revealing the bright pink union shirts. I think the choice of color for the uniforms and shirts was deliberate from the director, with the hot pink being a very feminine color. I think this was intentional symbolism to show that the women are taking agency over their own lives. The women then close the store and begin to walk out. Sunny joins them when she overhears the higher-ups plan to replace the striking women with part-time workers, rushing to warn them. The part-timers attempt to take their place, but the women overpower them and start occupying the store in a sit-in. Finally, the company agrees to meet with them, but dismisses them as ladies who are working for pocket money, insisting someone had to put them up to this. This is a pretty misogynistic trope, speaking as though these women, who are all over 30, are not intelligent enough to have decided to form a union on their own. Furious, Sunny replies, "I work to earn a living." This is also pretty telling because the company is basically acknowledging that they don't pay these irregular employees a living wage, calling it pocket money. The company says that if they agree to call off the strike, then they'll agree to negotiate. The women aren't buying this, pointing out that if they call the strike off, they'll just be replaced with the part-timers. They each tell their stories. Their mothers, university students, some have had other jobs, some have been lied to repeatedly over their employment at the mart. They sing and play games, but eventually the company shuts off the power. The police are called and there is a violent altercation, with the woman being dragged away or arrested. The violence receives national attention after being reported in the media. Eventually, with all of this scrutiny, regular worker Kang Dong-jun joins. They're not very impressed, pointing out that he did nothing to defend them earlier. They say if he wants to join the union, he has to take the fall from the company and become the union leader, which he agrees. For a while, things seem like they're looking up and they even get a lawyer. However, when Sunny finally goes home, she discovers that her son Taeyong has been staying out late and working a new part-time job. They get into a pretty nasty fight. While she's gone, the police show up at the union's camp, critically injuring Haemi's young son. Later, Dongjun is arrested. This marks the end of the union's power. Haemi, the creator of the union, returns to work because she's scared after what happened to her son, and one by one the women return. However, Sunny has finally talked to her son, who admits that he finally understands what she's gone through after working himself. She's inspired to try again and comes back to the store, giving a passionate speech. The working women make a final stand, pushing their supermarket carts into the police who arrive. I think this is where the movie gets its title. I'll now share the screen grabs from the movie's ending because the director doesn't explain it within the actual film, instead giving text explanations. It says that their fight against massive layoffs and labor union repression lasted for a long time. In the end, many workers were able to return to work on the condition that the leaders of the union, who led the strike, give up on their own reinstatement. So, that was CART. To me, this was a story about how workers' rights intersect with gender dynamics. The women were seen as expendable due to their temporary contracts not being taken seriously, but also because they were women. Company higher-ups repeatedly make derogatory comments about them, and they only gain real momentum when a man joins and becomes their union leader. The representation in the movie of all the irregular workers being women and all the regular workers being men was intentional in my opinion. Of course, in real life, this is not always the case, and plenty of women are regular workers. But the director does this to show that it's impossible to look at workers' rights in a vacuum. They are undeniably linked to gender. Despite the odds being stacked against them, I'm inspired by the fact that the women kept trying. They aren't, as management thinks, expendable, but employees with families, hopes, and dreams of their own. Though the ending was a bit unsatisfying, this is what happened in real life with the Elan strike, where all but the leaders got their jobs back. Despite this, I really enjoyed the movie, as it gave a good glimpse into the lives of workers who are normally looked down upon.